dangerous forms of violence being perpetrated by the Israeli occupation. In the occupied Arab territories, we see the siege, displacement, poverty, humiliation, and detention and torture of children. We also refer to the many victims, especially amongst children, of the mines planted by Israel in the occupied Golan. Providing an environment free of violence for children can only be achieved by monitoring all violations by Israel to the rights of the child.
I will now give the floor to representative of the United Nations Watch.
Thank you, Mr. President. This Council is charged with protecting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Today we ask, is the Council fulfilling its mission? Let us consider the most basic right, the right to life. As we heard this week from Amnesty International, Saudi Arabia is preparing imminently to execute 7 alleged child offenders, including Saran al-Mashayekh, who was also sentenced to be crucified over 3 days. Why is the Council refusing to address this in any resolution, urgent session, or even debate? 3 other countries known to execute juvenile offenders are Yemen, Sudan, and Iran, yet none of these situations is being addressed in any resolution. And while there is a resolution on Iran, it is silent on child executions, and indeed the text is devoid of any documentation whatsoever of other massive abuses, including against women, religious and ethnic minorities, and dissidents. Finally, the Council must do far more about the thousands of children subjected to violence and death in Syria. Now, today we heard from the Syrian representative about human rights in the Golan. This was a transparent attempt to change the subject from the dire, catastrophic human rights situation in Syria. Sadly, this has been going on for decades, and the United Nations has allowed Syria to present itself as a champion of human rights. Indeed, a resolution was circulated today, which was indeed presented and adopted each year, presented by Syria, adopted each year by this Council, on human rights in the Golan. This text embodies that which is wrong with giving Syria a free pass. Syria was allowed to portray itself as a champion of human rights every year, while Hafez al-Assad was murdering 20,000 people in Hama in 1982. Syria was sitting here as a member of the Human Rights Commission. 2 years later, it was re-elected. A year and a half ago, Syria was elected to 2 Human Rights Committees of UNESCO. A few weeks ago, Syria was elected rapporteur of the Decolonization Committee dealing with human rights. Mr. President, the situation in Syria today was allowed to develop, the Syrian regime was allowed to remain in power, in part because the United Nations granted false legitimacy to this murderous regime. Thank you, Mr. President.